Uh-oh. Hang on, everybody. Give me a second here. There we go. How are you? Great to see you, everybody. Congratulations on making it to the stream live. Let's see who's in the chat. This is Shaman T, 3 Indians showing up at 12:30 a.m. Well, thanks for showing up at 12:30 a.m. Make sure to take care of yourself and get enough sleep, but really appreciate the commitment to the stream. And Rashab Santake says, I missed yesterday's challenges. Can I complete them today? And of course, you're welcome to, but I don't think we give credit for any streams that occurred in the past. You have to kind of do them on the same day. And Eddie Snippet says, I just completed tomorrow's session on Hack Planner. Awesome. I'm glad. I'm glad you enjoyed that one. Good to see you too, Raichu, and everybody in the chat. I'm so excited that you're all here, and so let's go ahead and get started. Well, let me start with actually previewing what we did last time, and so I'm going to share my screen and show you all where we ended up last time. So last time we were able to kind of complete our basic planner app. We got the CRUD operations going, which I'll put them here. The CRUD operations is what we successfully completed yesterday, and we used local temporary storage in order to complete that, or also called ephemeral storage. Just using a list to store our tasks. But today we're going to actually do more. So if you weren't able to run your app last time, there is slides available for you to check out. I'll post those in the chat if anybody else has them in the chat. Let me see. I just posted it in the chat, the link to the slides. But if you copy the code on those slides from day one, and you type the following into your terminal, whether you're on Mac or Windows, you want to set your Flask app equal to app.py, and then type in the command flask run. That's going to get you up and running, and you can go to the website 127.0.0.1:5000 on your local computer, and that will get you up and running. Does anybody know, by the way, why we use this address? I'll leave that for the chat. Maybe someone in the chat knows why we use this address. Any Snippet has the right idea. It is for localhost. So localhost is 127.0.01 on most computers, and 5000 is the port number. And that's right. AirPlay was messing with things yesterday, so I apologize for that. But today I think we'll be just fine. We won't be running into any of those issues. And Green Willow says, because there's no place like home. That's right. That's why we use localhost. Okay, so if you get an error at this stage, actually Gaming Skull 16 told me this morning that you may need to install something called virtual env, which stands for virtual environments. So maybe try doing that if you get an error with the command flask space run. But I think it should actually work for you as long as you are in your Python terminal. VS Code doesn't recognize Flask. So I think the other thing you can do is you can type app.run, and then I think you type app.py or something like that. Yeah, you can try this command as well. I'll type it in the chat. Yeah, Yeah. Grinch Watches said I had to type Python-m Flask run for it to run on my terminal. So that's why I put this in here. And thank you for pointing that out, Gaming Skull 16 this morning to me. So I went in and edited my little slideshow here so that to let you all know about it. So hopefully that will resolve your issue. But yeah, that should get you running. If you visit the localhost web address, you should be able to see your hack planner. But today we're going to work on part 3, which is increasing the visual appeal. So you'll remember last time we had no styling whatsoever to our project. And we're gonna work on that today. So we've unlocked a new challenge here, and we're gonna create a new folder. So last time we created a templates folder, and today we're gonna create what we call the static folder. So let me show you what that will be today. Huh. For some reason, my VS Code is not coming up when I try to share screen. So Nikita says, "Hey Stephen, I didn't attend yesterday part 1, so would I understand what we're doing today or not?" And the answer to that is you should be able to follow along, but make sure that you check the slides. So I did send a link to the slides into the chat, and I'll send it again just so that you have it right at your disposal. And yeah, check that out. It'll be a really good resource for you. And as far as global or user path, I don't think it'll really matter. But yeah, make sure you create a new environment and then you could install Flask, just like is suggested in the chat. Okay, I think I figured out why it wasn't working for me, the Visual Studio Code. But I think it should work now. Let's see. All right. So hopefully you all can see now. I'm going to do the same thing I did yesterday, where I'll just make this a little bit larger for you, hopefully. By the way, you all might hear a banging sound or something from my stream. Don't worry about that. It's actually a holiday here in the US, Independence Day. So we have a lot of fireworks going off all day long. So if you hear a bang or something like that, don't be worried. It's just from the 4th of July. So yeah, happy 4th of July to anyone. Yeah. My dog is terrified. Yep. And on my street, there are many cars, and whenever there's a bang, all the car alarms start going off. So I hope that doesn't happen during our stream, but just stay tuned if it does. We'd really appreciate that. Anyway, let's go back to our code. So you'll want to create a new folder, which we can do by clicking on New Folder. And we're going to create this static folder. And the word static in programming is usually referring to when we have some kind of resource or asset that is not going to change with user input. So for example, if you're building a website for Apple computers, Apple Incorporated, you would not want to change their logo depending on what the user says, right? So their logo would be a static resource. But you might want to change the account name of the user depending on what the user input is, when they log in and stuff. So, or their shopping cart. And so that would be something we store in our database instead, so that we can update the records. And so static is a great way to hold things that do not change. Okay, so let's click on the new file button, and we're going to create a new file called styles.css. Okay. So styles.css. And for the first style, we're going to type the word body. And body, you might remember from our HTML document, is actually the tag that we use to encapsulate all of the information that we're going to display for the user to see. So what might we want to apply to the body? Well, first I'm going to try a font family. And so we have so many choices here of different fonts. I just have Arial set for this one. We also have background color. So I chose a background color that's kind of gray, not super attention grabbing, but you can choose whatever background color you'd like, really. And margin and padding are also characteristics you can use for any division. So these are just specifying that we're wanting this body to fill up the entire web page. Okay. Now I'm going to define a style for H1, and you'll remember from our checklist that H1 is the header, the first piece of information that we create for the user to see at first. Okay, so for H1, we're going to use the attribute text align, and we're going to say center so that the H1 header is centered on the page. And for the color here, I think I specified 333. So it's just a black header. Right, now we're going to get into a little more complicated stuff. So we've defined a few divisions and classes for us to use today. So the first one I'm going to do is what we call container. And this is where we're going to put our checklist itself. Haven't added this to the HTML yet, but we will. So this is going to have a max width of just 800 pixels and a margin of 0 and some padding as well. I'm also going to define another class. These are, again, labels we're going to apply to the individual parts of our checklist page. So within the container, we'll have some checklist items. Specify a list style type so that there's no bullet points or diamonds or 1, 2, 3 or anything like that. And we'll say padding equals 0 so that we don't add any extra space and create some extra white space that we don't want. Okay. Now we're going to define checklist items list, which means that it will be only when the class checklist items is associated with a list. And so let's go ahead and specify a background color for our checklist items. Border radius. You can actually play with these attributes. You don't have to implement them if you don't want to, or you can choose different values for them. But we're just specifying what the spacing, the colors, the styles will look like. If you have any questions about these, let me know if you want to know more about any of these attributes. And the reason we started off with this class specification with this LI, and now we're doing LIA, is because we're trying to give special rules for each element in the HTML file. So this might just be for the list item itself. And now we're using list and A being a link, to further specify how we'd like links to look. So we'll choose a different color for the link. Typically links have underlines, but we're actually going to get rid of that, and give a slight margin. Now we're going to create a specific class for the input fields that we have, called add form, and one for edit form. So we're going to specify both of those to have the same styling. For these, we're going to have them take up approximately 70% of the container that we specified before. We'll set the padding and the border as well. And you can play with these however you'd like to set them. Some of these forms will also have a button. So we want to specify the style for the buttons too. And yeah, this is kind of an interesting one, how you set the cursor for a button so that you can actually say how you'd like the cursor to look when it hovers over the button. All right, and I don't know if any of you have ever used these special hover keywords. There's also one for active, I think, but these are used to specify how you'd like the button to look when you hover over it. So we can actually set a slightly different color for that hover. Same thing with focus. This is a way for us to specify how we'd like the text fields to look when we're actually clicked into them. Okay. So taken together, all of this styling is hopefully going to help us with creating a nice colors. Someone says, did you make a virtual environment, Stephen? I actually did. Yeah, I do that by default, but I'm not sure if there might be a way to run the Flask app without a virtual environment. Someone says, do we have to code along or watch first in order to learn? It's really up to your learning style. If you'd like to code along with me, you're certainly welcome to. If you prefer to absorb it live, that's fine too. You know, afterwards, we're going to have a recording of the session. So if you want to go back and go at your own pace, you can pause and play and code along at whatever pace you'd like. Yeah, there's a way. So you would have to add Flask onto your path. So you can just try the virtual environments. That will be a little bit easier. All right, so now we're going to apply these styles to our checklist. And so I'm going to go ahead And by the way, the codes for the styles are available on the slide. So if you need to copy and paste them, you can just directly copy and paste them. All right. Okay. So to edit our checklist, we're going to actually add a reference to the style sheet. I don't think I did this in the slides, so maybe I'll add this into the slides now. I meant to, but I guess I didn't do this. So let me edit the slides for all of you to see. We'll also edit the Visual Studio Code sample here. And the first thing we're going to do is add in the style sheet to our checklist.html file. So within the header, we can actually put a link to the styles. And this is the link we'll use. So you can see it is actually referencing static and the file name that we specified, which is styles.css. And now all of the styles associated with body, associated with h1, are going to import. And we want to also add on some of the classes that we specified before. So for example, I'm going to create a add form class here. And that will allow us to apply all of the styles that are relevant to that form. Okay. And the same thing on the edit, we can apply that same exact style sheet to the edit.html file. And for our classes, we do want to add onto the form the edit form class. This is basically just allowing us to apply our styles specifically to the thing we're interested in styling. All right. So let me update our edit.html file too here. Oh, actually, the edit.html file is updated. It's just the checklist one that's not. So we want to also input all of our stuff into a division or container. All right. Same thing with checklist, by the way. I think I forgot to do that on our checklist. So let's do that as well for checklist. You didn't think we'd be doing some front-end design, but we are actually. Just because it's a super important part of the process of creating an app is creating one that looks visually appealing for your users, even if your users are yourself. All right, I'm gonna copy and paste this checklist stuff into the folder so that you can all view it. Okay, so I think that's it for our styling. And if you go back and try to run this application, you should see that we have some nice styles available. So let me actually present to you what it should look like. Or actually, let's wait for that portion. We're gonna have a little bit more fun adding features to our project. The way we're gonna do that is by adding a database connection. All right, so let me share my screen and show you that. So for adding a database connection, we want to start by creating a table. And the way that we're going to do that is by using this package in Python called SQLite 3. And the first step in using a SQL-like language is to create a database or create a table. So we specify the path of the database, which is just going to be, in this case, checklist.db. And we're going to, excuse me, and we're going to create a table using this function. So connection equals SQLite.connect DB path will establish a connection with our database. Then C will be the cursor for our database. So this is how we read and write information. And we're gonna execute the following SQL command: create table if not exists, checklist. And then this is the way in which the data will be stored and formatted. So we're going to have an ID, which is going to be an integer primary key auto increment, which means that we're going to have unique integers for every data element. And those are going to increment for each element. And then the second value stored in this tuple is going to be the exact item, which is a text value. And so that item is going to maybe be like start a new project, for example. So then afterwards we will commit and close the connection. All right. So whenever we run this create table function, a new database will occur. So let's revisit our CRUD operations, and now we have a database, a persistent way of doing that. Oh, it says cough freely, no problem. Sorry about that, everybody. Yeah, I just got a little bit of a cough, I guess. But okay, so let's revisit our CRUD operations. So within our app.py file, we're going to include that create table function. We'll also include this add item function, which is going to take the place of our previous code to update the items list. So with this add item, we're going to connect once again to the database, instantiate a cursor, and execute a SQL command. And so for this one, we're going to use the insert into SQL command. And that takes in a database, which is checklist, an item, and then the values associated with that item, which we're going to take from the local variable item. Okay, so we pass in some task in the function argument, and then it gets used in the SQL call. All right, so this SQL statement will then insert the value into the checklist database. And how are we going to call this function, add item? Well, we're going to do it with an endpoint. So we're using this Flask route to associate the add view function with the add URL path. And we're going to post that item and basically post it into the database. All right. So then we have our read method. And so our read method, we're going to have this get items function, which is exactly the same, but it has a couple differences. So the SQL statement is a select statement, and this asterisk, does anybody know why we use an asterisk like this in SQL? Okay, someone says, are we deleting the code we wrote in day one? Yeah, we'll delete portions of the code. So you just want your code to match what we have today. And I'll go through and show you exactly what we want to add or delete. And the Grinch Watches says, what does instantiating a cursor do? It allows you to basically read and write information into the database. So that's why we need a cursor. It's similar to how you do like read and write buffers in Python or in Java or in any language like that. Do we add the SQLite 3 function in the app.py file? Great question. And so thank you for pointing that out. We are going to absolutely import SQLite 3 into our project. So before we get any further, let me actually do some of these just as an example so that we don't get too lost in the sauce here. All right. So hopefully you all can see my screen here, and we're going to start like Gaming Skull suggested with adding SQLite 3. So we'll say import SQLite 3. Okay. So now we're going to have our create table database, our create table functionality written into this file. So we'll do that by connecting to the database path, which in this case is going to just be checklist.db. Right? And we will instantiate a cursor and execute the command create table if not exists checklist. And we have an integer primary key that we'll use as basically our task ID, which we'll specify that later shortly. And we have our item. And then commit and close. So commit is just committing those changes to the database, and closing it is just closing that database connection, which doesn't need to be open once we're done modifying. And we'll have the get items function, which we'll use to, we already talked about this one. We'll use this one to select from the database. Fetch all is just going to fetch all of the data and store it into this items list. Let's see if anyone in the chat was able to figure out what the asterisk stands for. It stands for anything, all, and to include all the data. That's exactly right. Someone says, can you explain line number 15? Absolutely. This actually should say ID. So in line number 15, what we're doing is we are specifying the format of the data that will be stored in our checklist database. So we're saying that we want to store 2 different variables for each data entry. We want to store an ID, what we're going to call ID, and that's going to be an integer type. These keywords, primary key, auto increment, they say what kinds of integers should be stored as the IDs. They should be primary key, so they're going to be like the unique identifiers for those task IDs and for those tasks. And then auto increment is going to increment them with each addition. And then the second data variable sort of thing is going to be called item, and it's going to be a text data type. So there's no further restrictions on it. We can just give any text data, and that will be our item. Hopefully that helps with your understanding about line 15. Great question. And so we'll create a few more of these methods. We're really creating these methods so that we can revise our CRUD operations to work with the database. And each time we have to connect to the database path, um, instantiate our cursor, and execute a SQL command. And we haven't seen these in the slides yet, but I'm gonna create a function for the update item. So update item requires actually two pieces of information. We need to know the value we're trying to apply to the update, and we need to know where the item's located. So we're going to ask for the item ID too. And when we connect to the database, we execute the SQL command update checklist. We set the item value, and then we use the where statement to locate the item according to its item ID. Okay. So this is going to allow us to update our record with SQL. Is items variable going to contain ID and the name of the item? That's exactly right. So each data entry that we produce is going to contain both a item ID, which is going to be like a unique identifier for that item, and whatever we call it. So that's a great way of summarizing and actually exactly what we're specifying in line 15. All right, so that's right. And Kakayo Joffrey says, what you're doing now is purely backend, and that's exactly right. So SQL is for backend. It is a database management language, and yeah, the user will usually not be writing SQL commands, and so that's our job as the software developer to do that. So let's do one last function here. Just going to be our delete item function, and again, it works the same way that the other functions did, where we connect to the database and we execute some SQL command. This time we're going to use the delete statement. We're going to delete according to the ID. Okay. So these are our CRUD operations. You can see we have C, R, U, D. And now we're going to implement them into the routes. So it's just like we were doing before in the slides for add, for example. Instead of appending our old item to this data list, this like local list that we had, we're going to use the add item method. That's going to allow us to connect to the SQL database and update that file instead of doing it locally, ephemerally. And for the get that we do here, just to read the data, we're going to update this one so that we can get the items according to get items. And also, we're going to run the create table function when we go to the first page, because we want to make sure that this table exists. And right now, it actually doesn't exist because we've never run this before. All right. Now I want to do delete. I actually want to skip edit because edit is the most complicated. But we're gonna delete this line that deals with our items list, and we're gonna put in a persistent sort of update so that we can actually persistently change those records. And when I say persistent, it means that we are making a permanent change. Okay, and then it says the ID in SQL starts with 1 or 0. So it will, I think, start with 0 because the first integer would be, oh, actually, I think it starts with 1. Sorry about that. Yes, it starts with 1. Snippet says, can you please upload the complete zip file of whatever you have developed till now in Hack Planner and Discord? No problem. Let me do that for you, actually, real quick. It'll only take a second. All right, I'm gonna put it into the Hack Together channel. So now it's available in the Hack Together channel. And the GitHub repository, which I linked last session, it does have all the updates from today, but it also has what we're going to do in the future. So for that reason, it might be a little bit confusing to rely on, but I'll just send that as well so that you have access to it if you want to check out that code. No problem. All right. So now we're going to use this one. I actually realized that this is really bad practice. I'm defining a function to be the same exact way as it was before. So maybe we can just give it a different name. Yeah, that way these are two different ones. That won't actually impact the code, but it's just probably not good practice to rename a function like that. Okay, so hopefully you all have been able to follow along for now. And we're going to now update the edit feature here. So for edit, we want to eliminate this line here and eliminate this line. And instead of updating using our list, we're going to call the update item function. And we'll say else get items. And we're going to take the next of the items, which has an item ID equal to item ID of interest. And so the reason we do this command is because we want to associate our tasks with the item ID. Let's imagine that you and your partner on the team, in the hackathon team, you both add the same entry, right? You both add an entry called get the front end finished, right? And how would we know which one we want to edit if they're both called get the front end finished? Well, the item IDs would be different. Maybe the item IDs are 4 and 5. And so we know exactly which one to delete because we've looked for this item ID and it's the only one we'll find. All right. So if we do update these items, then it would change, but the item ID would not change. Okay. So now we've implemented all of the different CRUD operations, but we've used a persistent database. And so what we're going to do now is go ahead and run the Flask app. So remember, you can just type Flask run, and it will tell you the localhost address. And hopefully that should work for you. Okay, someone says the file that we didn't get a zip file. That's not good. All right, I just tried to send it again. So hopefully that's sent the second time around. And so at this time, I think we're going to take a quick break so that everybody can catch up. Now that you have the zip file, hopefully you can make the CRUD operations. And yeah, I'll see you all in about 5 minutes. Okay, let me just get this background out of the way. Sorry, everybody. I always do that. I always leave the little splash screen up, and then nobody can see me. But really great to be here with all of you for the second half of our workshop. And in this second half, we're going to be continuing our work on this project. So let me share my screen, and I'll show you what we've gotten done so far. By the way, there was a couple of errors that folks ran into in the chat. One being that we get a 400 error. And the reason is actually because I forgot to update the routes. So because we're calling all of these functions, update item, add item, delete item, we can't call the routes the same thing. So I just changed the name of the route view functions to add, edit, and delete. And once you do that, it should get rid of your 400 error. I'm going to post another zip file when we have all of our CRUD operations implemented safely. Also wanted to point your attention to their checklist. I forgot to put a class checklist items here. So if you don't put that, it's not going to style correctly. So make sure that in line 10, you're putting the checklist items class. Okay. So that's all really good. And we can move on and test our application. So let's test our application, and we'll use Flask run to do that. And you can go to this web address, this home page address, and let me share my screen and show you all what it looks like. I think you'll be pretty happy with some of the designs that we have here. So now you can see we actually have a nice little green outline that appears when we go into when we're active into this text box, and we click the add button, and we get some things to add in. So I just put all these random filler tasks in here. I guess we could actually put in some real ones, like create a storyboard for the design, stuff like that. So one thing you might notice about this is it's actually displaying both our item IDs and the values associated with the task. So how could we fix this, right? This is kind of tough. Well, let's go to the checklist.html file and see what we need to change. Yeah, someone says use tuple unpacking to display only the task, and we're actually going to do that. So nice job getting that idea. So let me show you on the slideshow. So we're seeing that we get 1, 2, 3, 4 displayed here. And you all suggested a fix already, that the database gives a tuple in response, which is this object which contains both the item ID and the items that we were describing back in line 15. And so if we use tuple unpacking, it's going to be great for us. And we can just do that by modifying our item so that instead of displaying the whole tuple, it just displays the second element in the tuple, which is associated with index 1. Okay, so update your checklist.html file to do that. The second thing I want to bring to your attention is that delete and edit actually are not working right now. Does anyone have any ideas why they're not working? I'll show you actually the tab that I'm referring to. All right, so hopefully you can see the live version of this project. If I click delete, it works for a little while, and then all of a sudden it doesn't work anymore. You can see all these are just like impossible to delete or edit. They just give me none. Anybody know why? Somebody says they aren't buttons. That's actually not right. Good guess, though. And if you're still getting the 400 error, I'm going to upload another zip after this so that you all can have the verified correct project. Any Snippet says it may be because of the loop that you have written. That's a good question. That's a good suggestion. But actually, I don't think it's either of those. So let me show you actually. Oh, well, I suppose it is part of the loop. Yes. So we need to unpack the tuple inside of our routes as well. So it's actually because of the tuples again. It's the same reason as before. And so before this, it was just showing the entire tuple in the path. But the path actually refers to the item ID. So we could easily delete the items, the original items, but then once the list changes, we no longer are able to associate our tasks. So we need to use those task IDs because they are unique and associated only with that particular task. So to do that, just edit your paths so that they refer to the 0 index, which is that item ID. Okay. So yeah, exactly. There's something wrong with the IDs. Edit item tries to access and modify the items list, but is it even connected to the DB? That's a good question. Let's go back to that code. So if you remember, this is our update item. So in our route, it does accept the item ID as an integer value in the path. So then that item ID gets passed to our edit view function, and then it gets passed to the update item function. So if you look in the update item function, we are connected to the database, and we can use the item ID to locate that particular entry. It's kind of a big connection, hard to like follow all the logic through, but it is actually connected. Okay, so I'm gonna upload this zip file so that you all can see. Let me do that before we go any further. It'll only take a second. I'm going to call it Hack Planner Day 2 V2 so that you all can see that. It's different than the first one. It's going to be a fully functional version of this CRUD operations in the database. What did you change the route names? You can check in the zip file. And you used PyMySQL connector. That is not something I'm super familiar with. But I would recommend trying to look at their documentation to see how you can execute a SQL command. So all you need to do is see how do I execute a SQL command using PyMySQL connector, and hopefully that will help. But yeah, the route names I changed them to add, edit, delete, but you can change them to whatever you want. It doesn't actually matter. The route is associated with the path. And then it automatically calls whatever function is underneath the route. So you don't have to call them by any particular name. You could call them like tomato, apple, and spaghetti if you want. It doesn't really matter. You just can't call them the same exact thing as the SQL functions, which is what I did. So sorry, everybody. But yeah, now when you shut down your Hack Planner app and you restart it, it will actually keep all of your entries for you in a permanent storage. So that's a really great innovation that we have now with our project. And when you refresh the page or you turn off your computer and turn it back on again, there's absolutely no loss. So Eddie Enzio says, where can I get the zip doc? It's actually in our Hack Together page on Discord. I'll just post the Discord invite link in the stream. But if you want to get the final version of the project, you can also look at my GitHub repository, which has access to these files. All right, so we still have one more thing to do today, which is implement our reminders. So this is going to be a new feature for us, and it's going to basically allow the user to remind the team, hey, we have to complete this, this task. And so we're going to put two reminders in our project. We're going to put one that is just a prompt that shows up on the screen so that the user can see it. And we're also going to put a reminder that sends directly to a user's email address so that they can get an email notification in case they're away from their computer or they just check their email more often, whatever that might be. And this is going to, implementing this feature is going to give us experience in what we call APIs. So we're gonna get some experience with APIs. So on to the implementing reminders. First, we're gonna add a reminder button. And so this button is just gonna go right into our form. Oh, I'm sorry, not into our form. It's going to go into our checklist.html file as a packet of JavaScript. So you can use the script tags to put JavaScript into an HTML file, and that's exactly what we'll do. So we want to call the function setReminder, and we'll give it an item parameter here that the user can vary depending on what task it is. And then we're going to have a set timeout, which is going to execute whatever function is inside of the timeout after so many milliseconds. So we're just doing a 5-second reminder, which is kind of useless, but you could theoretically do like a reminder after 2 hours, for example. I just don't want to wait around to test if the 2-hour reminder worked. So we're going to choose 5 seconds. And in this function, we have a variable called reminder, and then confirm is a JavaScript object that will kind of, or a JavaScript function that will kind of trigger this prompt to appear on your screen, and the text that it displays will be reminder and then the item. And so if we get this, we could maybe handle the reminder action, whether they say cancel or okay, but we don't actually need to do that. All right. So, before we do this, I want to actually try this out and see if we can do that. Yeah, we don't really need this part actually. So let's try implementing that into our code sample. All right, so we're going to scroll down to the bottom of checklist.html, and we're just going to paste in our reminder prompt below. Right? We're also going to add a new button to the project, and that button is going to be a remind button. So let's put in the button. We can say, just give me 1 second here. We can put it below our edit and delete links. We can give it a special class if we want, or we could just, honestly, we don't have to give it a class. We could just say that on click we want it to trigger the set reminder function, and inside of there we're going to put item 1. So that will be the task associated with it. And we'll call this button remind. All right. So let's try this out with our Flask run command. Remember, every single time that you want to update your project, you need to use this Flask run keyword in order to restart your server. So let's go check out or project. You can see we now have a remind button. And when you press that button, it should trigger a prompt. And I don't know if you all can see the prompt. I don't think so, actually, because it's a different window from the share screen. But if you could see it, you would see that it pops right up. I'll take a screenshot and put it in the slides. All right, so does anybody have any questions about this? All right, so we are going to move on to our SendGrid API, and we may not actually finish this section, but we will just start it, and we'll get you started up with SendGrid. So let me share my screen and show you all the steps involved in getting SendGrid set up. And I want everybody to be able to get their account ready to go. All right, I'm not in presenter view right now, but let me get there. So the next step is for us to implement the SendGrid API. And we're going to go to this link, which is posted in the slides. I'm also going to post it in the StreamYard. There it is, posted in the chat. And you all can see that SendGrid is a way to send emails to your clients, to your users. Let's see, they have some use cases here of what you can do, like password reset, purchase receipts, and in this case, we're basically doing notification emails. So yeah, SendGrid is really useful for these types of things, and that's why we're going to implement it. And it's actually free, so that's another big reason why. And so at this page, you can click Start for Free, and it'll get you going. You can put in your email and your password there, whatever you want to choose. All right. So then once you create an account, I'm going to give you a few minutes to create the account. But once you create the account, we're going to start by adding a sender to your SendGrid account. And there's a link in the slides. I'll also post it in the chat for creating a sender. And you want to put that in there. By the way, you might think, oh, you're leaking some information on here, but it's actually an old address of mine. So I purposefully put an old address there up on the screen. So yeah, now we're going to go to our integrate section here. Right, so you could integrate using our web API or SMTP relay. And we're going to actually choose the web API button. And as far as the technologies go, you could use Python, for example. And so it gives you these steps. And so, in the time between now and our next session, I want all of you to go through this and try and implement this first test email with SendGrid. All right, so that will be your homework. If you can accept some homework, if I could be so bold as to assign some, it's just to try this out and see if you can get your SendGrid API key and send your first test email. If you can do that, it's going to be really, really useful for us for next time. So I'm going to post the link to this. We can and we will. I like that. I like that that attitude. So yes, this will be the homework for next time. But I think that's it for today. We've covered a lot of material, and so and I want to let everybody enjoy. If you're here in the United States, enjoy a holiday. So we will pick up in part 3 of the Hack Planner workshop, and that's actually going to take place on Thursday. And there's been a lot of popular requests for implementing this project in React as well. So maybe after we finish our API, we can work on implementing all of these features in React. So I'll see all of you next time for our third part of Hack Planner. But until now, take care. Until then, take care.